Hey, it's May still with the last possible second. And you guys had Ask Us Anything questions for us. And so we're going to answer them.
We have so many from you guys. It's fantastic. And so we're getting to a bunch more today. Thank you so much for sending them in. And we will get to more again down the road. But we're going to start out with Eric Riley, who asks, how did you and the rest of the What the Flick crew meet? Whose idea was What the Flick? And when did you become friends? Now, if I recall correctly, Cenk Uygur, creator of the Young Turks, created What the Flick. It was the first channel that he spun off from the Young Turks because he wanted a place to talk about movies and share his terrible opinions. Right.
And so Cenk the numbers. That was before my time. So I was not witness to any of this.
Yeah, it was Cenk and before mine as well. It was Cenk and Ben and Matt.
Right.
And the three of them did What the Flick. And then Cenk, like in time, had to go tend to
had other things to do.
His real purpose here. So then Matt and Ben invited me to come on, and then we invited you to come on.
Yes.
And how did we all become friends? I mean, I knew you just from screenings and LA
and
Film
LAFCA.
Critics.
Yeah, I know we started hanging out when you joined LA Film Critics, and then you introduced me to Ben at the Spirit Awards one year.
Oh, okay.
I remember this. I was a little tipsy.
So was I.
But then I started seeing Ben at screenings, and we would chat, and he would actually read my reviews and tell me that he disagreed with me or didn't or whatever. But that was nice. And then he reached out and asked if I wanted to do What the Flick, and I kind of came in originally sort of as an occasional rotating guest star, but then I sort of, you couldn't get rid of me, and that's when I met Matt, when I started doing with the What the Flick stuff.
Yeah, I met both of them through so for a year Ben and Ben Lyons did an incarnation of At the Movies, right, and so they used to have me on as like I can't remember what it was called, like Critics Roundup, something like that. And so Matt and I would be the guests on that with them. And so that's how I met Matt. And then I met Ben through television, and then I saw him at a screening, and then we all just became friends. So that's how it was. And that was like 2008.
Okay.
When I first met all those guys. So that is that. And then sort of piggybacking off of that, thank you for that question. Eugen Leonti, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name. I was very sad when What the Flick ended, but I never understood why. Could you tell us something about that? Thank you. Keep up the great work. It ended because the folks at the Young Turks decided to focus on political programming heading into the 2018 midterms. They had all these channels. They had like a TYT Sports, and they had like a pop culture and like a fashion show. And they realized we need to focus on the, our bread and butter political content. Yeah. And so they've canceled us.
Yeah. Basically.
We came in on a Monday to do our usual Monday news and DVDs, and the lights were off in the studio. It's like, oh, we're not doing a show today or ever again in our lifetimes.
I was on a layover in the Chicago airport on my way to the Venice Film Festival, and you texted me. Yep. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
It was late August. It was a Monday in late August. And then like 3 days later, Matt and I were at my dining room table doing it on this very podcast equipment right here. So thank you. Christine Dugas asks, what movie traumatized you as a child? She says that hers was The Light at the Edge of the World. And for her husband, it was Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
Oh my.
Starring zombies.
Yes.
What is your traumatizing movie as a child?
The first movie that I remember like having a fit over and having to be taken out was speaking of today's news, Pinocchio.
Oh shit. Why?
Monstro the Whale.
Oh,
that really, and it traumatized me so much that I didn't see Jaws until I was in college, even though that movie came out when I was 9.
Oh,
so
for me, I mean, early it was Fantasia.
Really? Wow.
The
Night on Bald Mountain.
Yes, the mops and the buckets, and Night on Bald Mountain. That was all terrifying. Yeah. And then eventually, it was The Shining. It was the Amityville Horror. The idea of the blood coming down the walls, and the idea that there was like a well in your basement that was a portal to hell, that scared the shit out of me. Even though I grew up in a mid-century modern ranch house in the valley where we didn't have basements. It was, and I was like
It's
7
there
or 8.
anyway.
No, but like, why did my parents let me see The Shining and the Amityville Horror when I was like 8 years old?
I don't know. I kind of self-censored when it came to horror movies. I was such a big chicken as a kid, you know. I was running out to see Funny Lady, you know.
That's good. You're a completist. So then we have sort of similar questions. Jeffrey Kinsey asks, what would you advise to someone who wants to start a job or career in film criticism and writing reviews? What are the first steps toward that? And then someone named Gearmaster with a 3 instead of an E says, what would you suggest to younger people such as myself who want to become successful reviewers such as yourselves? Thank you. Adding on to that, what was your biggest challenge to get where you are in the industry today? So kind of similar idea. What is your advice, Alonso?
God, this is a tricky one just because, I mean, look, I started in ye olden times where my first job after college was at a newspaper, you know, and newspapers are barely hanging on. We, I think, started in an era in which like publications were still like the main employers and where you could, you know, like maybe land a sweet staff job and be there for years and have some stability. And those jobs exist, but they are, you know, fewer and fewer and fewer every year. So if you want to be a film critic, I think you really need to sort of like figure out how to be entrepreneurial about it. I mean, like, you know, we started this show in the ashes of What the Flick and sort of, you know, have been working on like, how do we monetize it more on YouTube? How do we grow our Patreon audience? You know, that kind of thing. But that's like, we're self-starting this thing. It's not like, oh, we're going to do these reviews and then some TV network's going to pick us up and give us a gig. Like, no, they're not, you know.
Yeah, I agree with that too, that there aren't the kinds of traditional jobs that there used to be, like to be a film critic at a newspaper or a magazine. That is really rare. Very, very few of our friends have full-time jobs at newspapers. I also feel like there's never been a better time to just do your own thing because the barriers are so low, because it's so inexpensive to just get a mic and get a laptop and do what we are doing. Anybody can do what we are doing. You know, if you love film and you want to talk about movies, you can go out and do it today. You can get a podcast going today. You can, you know, write every day, start a blog. And maybe if you want to submit your work to various websites like the AV Club or /film or whatever that take freelance work, go for it. Why the hell not? Just go for it. If you are in college, write for your college paper, or if they have a radio station or a TV station, pitch that. My son's middle school has a TV news show. You know, there are places to put out these kinds of segments.
Yeah, you know, and so you're right. I mean, a lot of ways the gatekeepers aren't in place the way they were before. And so you can just go directly to your audience. But, you know, I mean, there's obviously a whole other question of like, if you want to be good at this, like watch a lot of movies, read a lot of other critics and get a feel for, you know, how they write and how they are able to talk about stuff. You know, be interested in things that are not movies so that you have other things to bring to the table, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to watch every kind of movie. Like challenge yourself to watch things that maybe you think you don't like. Like maybe you think, oh, I don't like Westerns or whatever it is.
Silent films or musicals.
Zombie movies, whatever you think you don't like really challenge yourself to just scroll through whatever, you know, if it's Canopy, if it's Netflix, and go, oh, I'm interested in this. I'm going to give it a try. So give things a try.
Yeah.
That too. Thank you for that question, both of you guys. All right. Someone named Chongamon asks, do you think there's an objective component to film criticism, or is it all just subjective? And also, have you guys ever aspired to be filmmakers yourselves? Fuck no.
Yeah, no.
I've never wanted to make a movie. That's like the cliche, right? Like, oh, you're all frustrated filmmakers who couldn't hack it. Like, never wanted to write a screenplay in my life.
I respect what the good ones do too much to even try and touch that stuff. I mean, I think there's a certain level of objectivity in terms of things like if something is badly lit, let's say, you know, or if the sound design is terrible. And again, people can even disagree about those niceties, but I think there's a difference between like, oh, you know, this shot composition doesn't work for me, and oh, you left the lens cap on, you know, like I think there's definitely things you can point to in that respect. Everybody brings their own, you know, all the stuff of their life to how they perceive art, whether it's what colors you like, whether it's what music appeals to you, whether it's how you think stories should be told, or how do you think they're most effectively told, so ultimately, yeah, it is super objective. And so when people talk about, oh, film critics are so biased, it's like, yeah, that's kind of the job.
Yeah,
We're not
human
reporting
beings.
news.
Right, we're not like machines that are like analyzing what shot compositions are. I mean, like,
Yeah.
we're human beings who bring our own experiences to it. I would say it's even more granular than that. Like, if you are walking into a movie in a bad mood,
Yeah,
and
sure.
maybe something uplifts you more than you expected, you might respond to it even more favorably than you thought. Or if you had like a really bad time in traffic getting to the theater and you couldn't find parking and you're harried, like, all that comes into it with you. So
Yeah.
I think it's impossible not to be subjective about anything, and maybe you'll watch it again in a different mood 2 years down the road and go, oh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All of that is true.
How Dilly Diamonds asks, have you been watching Better Call Saul season 6? And do you have any plans to recap it? Sadly, no. I've never seen any Better Call Saul. Actually.
Yeah, I have not. I kind of stopped watching it after we stopped doing it on What the Flick. Not for not liking it, but just time and stuff. So I hear it's great. I hear they're really killing it in this final season, but I'm several years behind, sadly. So no.
Yeah, same. Jonathan Caro asks, if you were to teach a college class about a director and his or her filmography, who would you choose and why?
Almodovar leaps to mind, certainly, but I think it might also be fun to do somebody like Stanley Donen, who over the course of his career did everything from like musicals to, several of my favorite films that aren't musicals, like Charade and Two for the Road, and also some really terrible films like, Staircase and Saturn III. So that might be kind of an interesting, thing to do. Yeah. What about you?
The Coen brothers leap to mind immediately for me because they are my favorite filmmakers, and they do also do a wide array of different kinds of genre of film. If you look at like from Raising Arizona to No Country for Old Men to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Those are 3 extremely different films, to A Serious Man.
Sure.
So, and yet there's a through line about their movies that is unmistakably them. So I think I would just enjoy going back and revisiting all their movies and talking about it with people. Ipek Kormurku asks, why are they not making good comedy / rom-com movies anymore? You start watching something thinking finally a good one, then substance abuse and unnecessary R-rated stuff happens. We need to return to the 90s kinds of rom-coms. I would argue they are making great rom-coms because we just talked about one today and it's called Fire Island.
Yeah. And if you're objecting to like, R-rated stuff, the rom-coms of the 90s include stuff like There's Something About Mary. So like, I don't know which, look, that obviously is very subjective as to what you think is offensive or that takes you out of it. And that's perfectly valid, whatever that is. But yeah, I think if you're looking like at Netflix right now, they're, the To All the Boys I've Loved Before movies, I think were all really solidly entertaining. What was the one with Ali Wong and
that was cute.
Always Be My Maybe.
Yeah.
I think there are rom-coms out there. They're just maybe not in the traditional places and with the the stars that that might leap to mind when you think about the rom-com folks. But I think they're out there. And if you are offended by the modern sensibilities of the contemporary ones, I bet you there's a lot of great ones from the 30s and 40s that maybe you haven't discovered yet.
Jose Covarrubias asks, what is the most insane, batshit crazy movie you've ever seen? Mine might be a little obvious because it's The Room, and it's now kind of like mainstream and acceptable. I mean, they made a whole other movie about it called The Disaster Artist. Every choice, every frame I have questions about what Tommy Wiseau was thinking, and it's just none of it makes sense together. Anyway, The Room is for me.
Mine would be, I've got a couple. The Apple obviously I think is just a movie I could watch and infinite times and still be like, wow, what were they thinking? So I wore my Canon shirt today for that one. But also a film called After Last Season, which is maybe best known for when they dropped the trailer and people thought it was like a joke or viral marketing for another movie or something because it was so bizarre and non sequitur packed. And the film is just the same way, but also with really terrible lighting and the worst computer animation you've ever seen. And it's kind of shrouded in mysteries like who made it and why. It's a very bizarre experience. And thankfully I still have my DVD. But yeah, if you can track that one down, it might be, I'm sure it pops up on YouTube every so often. That one's bananas.
It's crazier than the apple in the room.
Oh yeah, yeah. Believe me, I'll show it to you one day. It'll be
please.
yeah.